No,
Have
he's
you?
come up with a book of trash. That's all that is a book of trash. Lies, lies, and more lies.
It started with a whisper. For decades, fans of Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, carried a question no one dared to say too loudly. A question about her family, her legacy, and her eldest son. When a DNA test finally surfaced after her passing, that quiet suspicion suddenly exploded into the spotlight. And what it revealed shook even the most loyal admirers of the legend. But this isn't just a story about one test. It's about a family torn apart, wills scribbled on scraps of paper, and secrets buried so deeply that even death couldn't silence them. When Aretha Franklin passed away in 2018, the world stopped. Her voice had defined generations. Songs like Respect and Natural Woman weren't just music, they were history itself. The mourning was global, but inside her home, something darker was beginning. Instead of leaving behind a crystal-clear will, Aretha left behind fragments, handwritten notes, crossed-out sentences, pages tucked inside locked cabinets, and strangest of all, one spiral notebook hidden under the cushions of her living room sofa. These scraps weren't just messy reminders of an artist's private life. They were potential legal weapons, and they cracked open long-buried family tensions that no spotlight had ever revealed. Aretha was more than the Queen of Soul. She was a mother, and her four sons, Clarence, Edward, Ted White II, and Kecalf, suddenly found themselves in a storm they never asked for. In one will, written in 2010, she seemed strict and controlling, demanding that Edward and Kecalf finish business courses before inheriting, placing Ted in a position of power, and treating the estate like a lesson plan for her children. But the later 2014 will told a different story. This one was softer, warmer, and most shockingly, it gave control to Kecalf, the son least in the public eye. No demands, no conditions, just trust. For the brothers, this wasn't just paperwork. It was their mother's voice speaking from beyond the grave. And that voice gave very different answers depending on which page you read. But beneath the estate battle, one name carried the heaviest weight: Clarence. Aretha's eldest son had been the subject of whispers for as long as anyone could remember. Born when Aretha herself was still a teenager, Clarence's father was listed as Edward Jordan Sr. in her handwritten wills. But the rumors never stopped. Some insisted another man was the true father. Others believed Aretha kept the real story hidden to protect her reputation in an unforgiving world. And Clarence himself? He never gave the public an answer. He lived in the shadows of speculation, his silence louder than any denial. So when the wills were discovered, repeating Edward Jordan Sr.'s name as his father, fans didn't feel reassured. Instead, they felt suspicious. Why did Aretha feel the need to repeat it over and over? Was it really the truth? Or was she trying to bury something deeper? By 2019, the Franklin family drama had moved into the harsh light of a Michigan courtroom. The stage that once celebrated Aretha's soaring voice now became a battleground over her final words. Michigan law recognizes handwritten wills, even messy ones, as long as they're signed and dated, which meant both the 2010 and the 2014 versions had legal weight. On one side, Ted White II's lawyers argued for the 2010 document. It was strict, structured, and showed Aretha's rational side. A mother making sure her sons would grow up, take responsibility, and prove themselves. On the other side, Kecalf and Edward's team pushed for the 2014 notebook. They brought in handwriting experts, house staff, even neighbors, all testifying that Aretha often jotted notes in that very spiral notebook on her sofa. They pointed to the playful detail in her signature, a tiny smile hidden in the letter A, as proof this wasn't just a random page. It was her true, final message. The courtroom atmosphere was suffocating. Fans gathered outside. The media picked apart every stroke of Aretha's pen. And inside, the brothers sat apart, barely looking at each other. Ted's face was set in stone, convinced his mother had once chosen him. Kecalf clenched his fists in silence, hoping to prove he was worthy of her trust. Edward sat quietly, eyes locked on the 2014 will, as if it carried a secret promise. And Clarence, the one son tied to the oldest rumor of them all, sat in silence so heavy it felt like its own testimony. But this trial wasn't just about two wills. It was about truth, about whether Aretha Franklin's final voice would be heard through a strict legal document, or through hurried notes hidden beneath a sofa cushion. And while the world waited for the jury's verdict, another rumor was about to resurface, one that fans believed could change everything. Because behind the estate battle, whispers about a DNA test were spreading. Was Clarence really the son of Edward Jordan Sr.? Or had the Queen of Soul left behind a deeper secret that even her handwritten wills couldn't hide? The answer would stun the public. The courtroom drama was tense enough, but as the Franklin brothers fought over wills and houses, the real storm was happening outside those walls. Because fans weren't just watching a legal fight. They were waiting for an answer to a question that had haunted Aretha's legacy for decades. And all eyes were on Clarence, the eldest son, the silent shadow. Rumors spread like wildfire. A DNA test had finally been done. For years, fans speculated that Clarence's father might not be the man Aretha had written down in her wills. Whispers suggested someone closer, someone she couldn't name openly. But then came the claim that confirmed what her notes had said all along. According to reports, testing tied Clarence back to Edward Jordan Sr., the man Aretha had always identified as his father. On the surface, this should have ended the speculation. The Queen of Soul had been telling the truth. But in reality, it only deepened the mystery. Why had Aretha repeated Jordan's name across multiple wills, almost as if she were forcing the record straight? Why had Clarence never spoken publicly about it? And if the DNA test really proved the connection, why wasn't it ever openly shared with the world? The silence was deafening. In July 2023, the jury delivered its decision. The 2014 spiral notebook, tucked between the sofa cushions, was declared valid under Michigan law. The courtroom went silent, then erupted. The will gave Kecalf control of the estate, including Aretha's Bloomfield Hills mansion, once valued at $1.1 million. Edward was recognized. Clarence remained acknowledged as her firstborn. But Ted White II, the son who had once believed he was his mother's right hand, was left on the outside. And yet, the detail that left the public in awe wasn't about money. It was about the signature. Aretha had signed her name with a tiny smile drawn into the letter A, a playful, almost childlike symbol, as if she wanted her last words to carry not bitterness, but warmth. Fans saw it as her final wink at the world, a reminder that even in death, she chose love over control. But Clarence's story refused to fade. The verdict named his father. The DNA test rumors seemed to confirm it. And still, doubt lingered, because Clarence never spoke. Not to the press, not to fans. His silence became the loudest part of the story. A man living in the shadow of a global icon, forever tied to speculation he never asked for. To some, his silence was painful proof that the truth was darker than anyone admitted. To others, it was his way of protecting the little privacy left to him. And in that silence, Clarence became more than just Aretha Franklin's son. He became a symbol of the private wounds families carry, even when the world is watching. Aretha Franklin gave the world some of the most powerful songs in history. But behind the curtain, she left a legacy of contradictions. Strict wills versus loving wills. Public confidence versus private scars. Her 2014 notebook may have settled the estate, but it didn't settle the questions. Fans still ask, why did she hide notes in sofa cushions? Why did she repeat Clarence's father's name so insistently? And why, after a supposed DNA test, did the truth still feel incomplete? The answer might be simple. Some secrets were never meant for us. Aretha Franklin will always be remembered as the Queen of Soul, a voice that shook nations and lifted generations. But her story proves something deeper, that even the brightest stars carry shadows. Her sons walked out of court with different fates. Kecalf as executor, Edward relieved, Ted wounded, and Clarence silent. That silence, to this day, feels like the final verse of her story, unfinished, unresolved, and haunting. Maybe that's why her 2014 signature carried that tiny smile. Not as a final answer, but as a reminder that life is not about solving every mystery, but about holding on to love, even when the truth is complicated. And for fans, that may be the hardest truth of all. Because in the end, Aretha Franklin didn't just leave us her music. She left us a story that refuses to end. A story of respect, of struggle, of silence, and of secrets that may never be fully revealed.